Hi everyone, it's Desiree Caskey, and I'm going to be sharing with you a series of short videos about creating a virtual classroom. And what I'm going to do is just kind of chunk this up into little steps that hopefully will make sense to you. Before we begin, I want to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to do. And one thing that sometimes happens is you watch a video and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I know there was a hyperlink in there, but how do I get to that hyperlink? So I want you to walk away with this presentation format so that it has hyperlinks in it and you can visit some of the links that I've given you if you need to. So if you mark down, you can see it says at the bottom of the screen, bit.ly/ all caps MSU, all lowercase, V Classroom. It will take you to this slide presentation that I'm using to create this series of tutorials, and then you'll have the hyperlinks built into that presentation, and that is yours to use if you need it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn my camera off. You don't need to see me. I'm not the one that's important here. So let's take a look at my screen, and then let's start with our objectives for today. So what I want to do is talk to you about these things. Purpose. My EDU 270 students, my EDCI 572 students, you know that whenever you are planning a lesson, the first thing you do is you think about, why am I teaching this? Why am I teaching it this way? Why am I using these tools? So we want to talk about the purpose of using a virtual classroom. And then in another tutorial, I'm going to show you just some tips on how to do a Google image search. I'm sure you know how to search in Google. These are just some tips that might help you save some time. I love the saying, work smarter, not harder, and so hopefully this will help you. When you create a virtual classroom, I have found that using Google Slides is the easiest tool to use. It's the best desktop publishing program, and because you can publish it out as a web page, ta-da, you've got this all-in-one tool to help you make a virtual classroom. We're also going to look at Bitmoji, which is a tool that lets you create your avatar. And so we're going to look at the Bitmoji Chrome extension and how we can use that to put our avatar into our virtual classroom. And then another tutorial will include how to use the tool called Photo Scissors, which is super cool. It's just a website, free, that allows you to remove the background from any image. So if you are finding something on the internet, an image on the internet that you want to use, but it has a lot of unnecessary background, then you can actually remove it using this tool. So those are our objectives for this series of video tutorials. Okay, today let's talk about purpose. Why would I create a virtual classroom? Besides the fact that I like to make fancy rooms or interactive lessons, or I want to put my avatar everywhere in all different kinds of poses. Those aren't really my reasons. I'm not a big designer. I have no art aptitude at all. So that's why I love being able to use some of these features that I'm going to show you. But really, truly, I think the purpose for a virtual classroom is when someone is trying to learn something new or to get information in a learning environment, a picture is worth 1,000 words. If I'm doing a research project on the owl or different types of owls, I would much rather see a picture of an owl than the word owl. Or maybe I want to see the picture and the word together. So using a virtual classroom allows us to put images to the content that we want to teach. When you use a virtual classroom, you're creating an interactive learning environment, and so the interest level automatically increases. Think about the video games that students like to play. a lot of them are role-playing games where you go into a room and you look around the room and you click on something to go somewhere else. Well, that's what a virtual classroom does. So it's automatically creating a higher interest level for our students. I think that when you create your own virtual classroom, you're also letting your students get to know you a little bit better. I mean, when you use your avatar, you get to kind of show them your style. When you create your own room, you're showing them the things that you find value in or the things that you enjoy. And you'll see that as you look at different virtual classrooms, you're going to find a lot of personalities in these learning environments, which I think is super cool. The next reason or purpose that I would use a virtual classroom is if you work with non-readers or struggling readers, it's really nice to have, instead of giving them a list of URLs and they have to figure out what the URL is going to go to or click on it just to figure out where it's going to go, I think using images allows the non-reader or the struggling reader to know where they're going to be going before they even click on it, so they're not struggling to try and figure out what's happening. You don't want to put roadblocks up for your students before the learning has even started. So that's why I think it's really important. And then probably, honestly, the most important reason that you would use a virtual classroom is you are probably going to teach remotely. So when you are teaching remotely, tools like Seesaw, Google Classroom, and those other learning environments are great. But when you create a virtual classroom, you're creating an interesting, engaging, and effective learning environment that your students are going to want to visit more often than a list of links. So those are the main purposes of using a virtual classroom in my mind. There may be others that you think of, and if that's the case, share with me. I would love that. Comment on this video series and let's get a conversation started. Okay, so first things first, we're going to talk about using Google Images, a Google image search, and how to effectively use a Google image search when we are gathering our material for our virtual classroom. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to hit escape on my keyboard so that I can get my tabs. I'm going to get a new tab and I'm going to type google.com. And when I get to Google, I want to come over here to images and click on that so that I'm actually in the image search. Okay, the first thing you want to probably look for when you're creating a virtual classroom is the background. And you probably will have two elements that you want to put into your background. The first one is your wall, and the second one is your floor. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to get some images into our virtual classroom. I really like Rustic. Again, my students are going to learn about me this way. So I might type in brick wall. Oh, and there it's showing up already. Background. I'm going to choose that. Now here's what's important. Notice when you click on your image search, you automatically get some new elements that you can use in your searching. This is just my experience. I am not an expert in Google image search, but I have noticed when I click on these buttons that have been made available to me, my search goes downhill. And so I don't use those. Just an FYI. The first thing I do is I click on Tools. And what that does is it allows me to emphasize some things that I want in my classroom. So for example, I know I'm going to be filling my slide with a wall. So I want to make sure the size is large. The reason that you want to make sure your size is large is because if you start with a small image and you enlarge it, you get distortion. If you start with a large image and you shrink it, it does not become distorted if you resize it correctly. So first thing I'm going to do is click on Tools. The next thing I'm going to do is choose a large image. I'm just going to work my way across because we're going to look at most of these tools here. I'm going to go to Color. When I'm looking for images to put in my Google Slides, I choose Transparent. Does anybody know why I choose Transparent? If I'm going to be bringing images in, like a floor lamp or a potted plant or a penguin, I don't want images that have a lot of information in them. I just want the item and then a clean background. Now, we know a little trick to get around that, but if we can avoid that in the front, we're working smarter, not harder. So I choose large, transparent, and then under usage rights, I choose labeled for reuse. I don't want to steal someone else's information or images and use them as my own. Now, the next tool that you might click on is Type. And this is saying, do I want to have clip art, a drawing, or a GIF as my image? And you might just have to play with this a little bit. It just depends on what type of background or what type of images you want to bring in. Here's what I do every time. Get off there. Sorry. Here's what I do every time I start creating my virtual classroom. I go to Google Image Search, I go to Tools, I click on Large, I click on Transparent, and I click on Labeled for Reuse. The reason that I do those three things before I start anything else is I know I'm starting off with the correct, what's the word I want to use? The correct beginning, right? Like I know that I've got the right size image. I know that I'm not going to get a bunch of noise background, and I know that I'm using them with integrity. So I always just start with those three. Once you start looking for other images to add to your slides, you may adjust the type as you're working. So, and that's totally okay. All right, hopefully that makes sense to you. We're going to move to the next step, which is getting our images and getting them somewhere that we can reuse them. So let's take a look at some of these brick wall backgrounds that I got here. Pretty weird, huh? You may have to scroll a while to find what you're looking for. And look what I just found. I just found a brick wall with a window in it. Ooh, this just gave me some ideas of what I could do for my virtual classroom. So I'm going to click on this image, and it's going to bring it up on the right-hand side here and give me a little thumbnail view of my image. All right, what might I want to do with this? Well, here's something cool. Just look for just a second. If I scroll down, I actually get to see related image searches. Look at this rustic brick background. Sorry, you're learning about me whether you want to or not. That might be one that I would look at. And so you get to choose from different backgrounds that are kind of similar to the one that you were looking at. I really like this one though, so I'm going to stick with it. Okay, so this is going to be my background. I want to take this background and I want to get it into Google Slides. The first thing I need to do that is to save my image, and I'll explain why in the next video tutorial. So how do I get this image saved to my computer? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right-click on the image. Now, let's talk about this for a second. Everyone has a different way of right-clicking. You may have a two-finger click on your trackpad. You may have a mouse that you right-click on. You may control-click if you're on a different machine. However you right-click, go ahead and do that. This is what right-click means. You're going to get that menu that pops up. I'm going to say Save Image As. Now, here's what's important to me. I want to create a general location where I put all of my images I'm going to use. So I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it vClassroom. Now inside that classroom, I'm going to start creating or adding my images. So I'm just going to call this background with window. Why do you think I did that? Background with window. Yeah, I might go along and find a different background and be like, ooh, dude, I got to try that one and see if that one works better, right? So I'm going to call this one background with window. Bricks with window might have made more sense, but that's okay. We'll stick with this. And then I'm going to click save. Okay, so we're going to stop with this tutorial. We've talked about quite a bit, and I just want to remind you of a couple things that we talked about. I'm going to sneak back here for a second. First of all, we're talking about the purpose. We talked about the purpose of our virtual classroom, and hopefully that will be solidified as we continue to go through these tutorials. We're looking at gathering our images. The first thing that we learned is when we do a Google image search, we want to use the tools feature that it has. Make sure that you select large for your image, because then you're going to be able to resize your images easily without distortion. Make sure you choose transparent as your color, just in case you find any images that you want to be able to put on top of other images cleanly. And then we used labeled for reuse. We are gathering our images with integrity. We are not just stealing people's images and using them as our own if we do not have permission. Okay. Then we learned once we click on an image, it will show up as a thumbnail on the right, and we simply right click on it and save that image into a folder. That's what I would think would be best, because we're going to be gathering a lot of images. Once you have that, this is what I would do. You might do it differently. I would go back and gather more images. We'll keep going with that in the next tutorial.